Hello, everyone, and welcome to the World of Dragons podcast. Today it is just me, Ray, normally referred to as the Sea Dragon, but for today we're going to drop the on and off IP for a bit. Dilatan had some issues with his work. A co-worker caught COVID, and so he had to cover for him, so he was extremely busy the last 2 weeks. Bantam had some issues of his own, and while he could have made it, we decided it was better if we put off the review for the Age of Fire book for one episode, and I would just experiment with a solo episode. Kind of just talk to you guys about the show, and then at the end give you some suggestions of some books that I have read, since I am the bookworm of sorts, to kind of make up for having you guys sit through this. And I don't know how fast we will get to a lot of them, so might as well just throw them out there, right? This is really awkward for me, recording by myself, so bear with me. I might have some ocean noises going in the background. I'm going to cut this out if not, but if I do, I'm just experimenting, this being a solo episode, kind of off the beaten track, just seeing if it helps cover up some of the background noise that I've noticed while editing. A lot of breathing sounds and sniffles and all that. But yeah, so the show is kind of done as a hobby. It was started almost on a whim by me, just an idea that I had one day. So we're all doing our best to find some free time to get it done together. Enough free time to partake in the media that we want to review and discuss, and then getting together all at the same time to review and discuss it. It'll become easier moving forward. I just ask that you kind of be patient with this while we continue to figure this out. This is the first and only podcast that any of the three of us have done. And there are a lot of learning pains, especially on the editing side of things. It takes a bit longer to edit than I thought. So, originally, just to talk about the show and its conceptualizing and how it's brought into being, I am the one that came up with the idea for the show. I want to say I'm the biggest dragon fanatic out of the three of us, but who knows, maybe the other two just keep it under control much better than I do. I'm kind of regressing into the borderline high school fanboy stage of my life. I read a lot of books in high school, like a whole lot, because in high school you had just more time, I guess. You didn't have to worry about work or any of that. Also, my parents were particularly strict with video games and all that, being a little old-fashioned, so I had a lot of free time to just do my own thing, whatever. Couldn't really, or didn't want to watch TV, nothing was really on that interested me back then, but couldn't play a lot of video games. I'd play outside every now and then, but for the most part I was just left alone and read. So I read a whole lot, fell in love with dragons and fantasy and all that. Then got older, kind of fell out of it, just getting used to life and the world, and you know how it is. Or if you don't, you will. But yeah, I've just started getting back into it again. So I went online, trying to find books that would be relevant to my interests, let's say. Books that would feature dragon characters prominently, preferably from their point of view, or if not dragons, other just not human things, just because it's much more interesting to me to read a point of view that isn't human or human adjacent like elf or dwarf. They can be fine if they're written well, in that their culture is very different and very unique, and the author actually addresses some of that. But at least from my experience, at least from my high school experience, I guess, they're not really they're not really written that different from human characters, just with a couple, like, words switched in, like they'd swear in Dwarvish or Elvish rather than in English or whatever the common tongue is. We'd refer to their deities and cities and whatever by name, and a couple other stand-ins, like rather than saying my king, it would be High King or Chancellor or Elder or whatever, depending on the situation, right? Or the world that they were in, rather. So I was online looking for lists, and was really disappointed by what I could find. Like, first off, it didn't seem like there was a lot out there, like at all, which was kind of disappointing. But I noticed that a lot of the lists I was looking at, which would either be recommendations from other people on Reddit or whatever other forums I was browsing at the time, or lists of dragon characters on like Wikipedia or just whatever, right? I noticed that a lot of the stuff that I used to read wasn't on any of these lists. And so I figured there just wasn't a good enough resource out there to help find it. And the few things that were mentioned didn't give enough information to let me know if it was exactly what I wanted. Like, I guess, for example, The Hobbit. Hobbit's a good book. It's one of the only J.K. Rowling books that I've read. Smaug, if I remember correctly, it's been like 15 years, uh, isn't in the book for a very long time. I would say less than 10%, because it's mostly, the journey and then the battle afterwards. Uh, but looking at lists of books with dragon characters, he would always make it on there because he's just very popular. Everyone knows about him, mostly because of the movies, but just because it's J.K. Rowling. Oh my god. It's not J.K. Rowling. What the hell's wrong with me? I'm so bad with names and I got so many authors floating in my head right now because I was going to talk about books later. Uh, J.R. Tolkien. There we go. I'm sorry. Yeah, big dip on my part. I wonder how many of you were just seething in anger and now you're finally placated. But anyway, so very popular media. So he would always make the list even though he wasn't a very prominent character. Like, he's a big character, don't get me wrong, but he's not very prominent. And I think if it was anything other than Tolkien's work, it would have been very disappointing to read that, expecting a dragon character, because you found it on the list, and then you find out he's there for a handful of chapters, and then, spoiler alert, gets killed off. Uh, Similarly, the Wheel of Time gets suggested a lot in forums, but then at the same time, people always say that like it doesn't get good until book 4, or the I don't even know if this is going to be spoiler because I haven't read it, so I'm just guessing. But like the dragon character doesn't show up until like book 6 or whatever. And just from someone who wants to read that kind of stuff, that would just been really disappointing to get through that many books and then finally get to the character that I care about, and then it probably doesn't even turn out the way that I wanted it to, right? So initially, I was going to write like a blog, like just a list of just everything that I come across from all these different sources and from my own personal experience. And of course, I would like take the dive and read into some of these things that had very little information online about it, and then put it on my online blog list or whatever. And that was the original plan. Uh, that it was hard to get motivation for that just because writing is difficult. If I could sit down and force myself to write, I'd have written a book by now, I swear to God. But then, I don't remember exactly how it came up, but the thought of doing it as a podcast came up. So I took a brief preview into online guides to see how easy it was to do it. And a lot of them actually started out saying, now is the best time to do a podcast because there's like, making up numbers here, like 10 million blogs, but only 100,000 podcasts. So you stand out slightly better, and technology has made it easier, and everything is available and open source, and just go for it. So on a whim, basically, I asked the other two if they would do it with me, letting them know that it would be a good amount of reading, and they don't particularly like reading, but to make up for it, I would agree to do movies and video games and that with them. And they agreed. They both wanted to be on a podcast. They just never knew what kind of podcast to do, and they both like dragons like me, so we decided to get together and start a podcast. Previously, I had attempted a book club with them, but that kind of fizzled out, mostly through schedule aligning, because there were other people besides the three of us in there, so the group kind of fell apart, and Dilettant in particular just couldn't, I guess, keep up with the pace that I had set. We had started with The Wings of Fire, and I had set the pace of one of the books every 2 weeks, which personally I don't think is that much, but again, I understand that I am the one that loves to read among us. So maybe it is a lot, I don't know. I'm assuming most of you listeners would agree with me. It's not that much because coming across this podcast, it's probably because you love reading as well. Or maybe you just came for the movies. Maybe the Dragonheart episode really caught your interest and you're just waiting for us to review another movie or game. I don't know if you can tell from my voice. I'm really nervous doing this. It's really weird for me. It's one thing to record with other people, but to just do it by yourself and talk into the void feels so different. It's an experience for sure. But yeah, I'm getting through it, and we'll see. Hopefully, we never have to do it again. Maybe once or twice, and we'll give the other two a chance to do a solo episode, and they can talk about themselves. But hopefully, no more beyond that. Maybe like once a year we run into an issue, but whatever, right? Just be gentle with me, all right? But yeah, so that's how the show started, and then we got together to record the first couple episodes, the Wish Dragon and Tooth and Claw. Started with I thought was an easy book, even though it turns out Bantam just hated it. But yeah, recorded them, I edited, uploaded. Learning experience there. Editing, my god. I'm actually not really happy with my editing, mostly because I feel like it sounds a little, I guess, empty, which is why I'm hoping to experiment now with these ocean sounds. Hopefully they're not distracting, and I picked ocean because it's my solo episode, and I'm supposed to be a sea dragon, so it makes sense you would be talking to me on like a beach or something. We could do something much gentler, because I imagine waves are probably a bit rough or loud or something, so we could do just like really soft nighttime noises, rain sounds maybe, but that would probably put some of you to sleep, honestly. I know Bantam loves to fall asleep to rain sounds. But yeah, another challenge that we've kind of come into is, I guess, just keeping up with the schedule. Part of it is procrastination on my part. Like, I'm recording this the day I need to edit it, the day I need to upload it. It's kind of put off mostly because I was trying to find the best time to record by myself without feeling like a fool. But yeah, the other two have, like I said, have trouble reading sometimes. And with this 3-book set we're getting into, The Age of Fire, it's going to be a little bit trickier. They're definitely going to be burned out afterwards. I mean, like I said, the book club fell apart. If this just turns into an auditory book club, they may not be completely happy with it. So after these 3 books, we're going to do a small, I guess, break, doing just movies and games and TV shows and other easy stuff to consume before getting into the next book thing. I just really wanted to do Age of Fire because it's great. It's one of my favorites, sure, but I could say all of these are my favorites because they're all dragon related. But I also feel like it's one of the more popular ones, and I feel it's better to get the popular ones out first. I feel like it would help build the listener base. Just, I don't know, I guess people who love Wings of Fire would randomly search Wings of Fire and see if anything came up, or Age of Fire, or Temeraire, or God, I don't know what's popular. I need to go to like a Reddit and do a poll or something, I guess. So yeah, tell your friends, help share it. I would really appreciate that. If you're embarrassed to share it because of some aspect of the show, then also let me know, because maybe that's keeping people from sticking around. As far as, so I'm going on tangents here, which I guess is to be expected, recording by myself. But to circle back to the show, that's kind of how it started. And as far as stuff we want to cover, obviously, Dragon Meteor, that's kind of in our name and in our creed that we try to say at the beginning of every episode. I don't have the written creed that we came up with in front of me right now, but the idea was to help people find media, mostly novels, because that's what I wanted, but also books. Novels and books are the same thing, you idiot. But also movies and TV shows and video games that involve dragons or other monstrous creatures. I say monstrous creatures because I feel like there's not enough dragons, and there's a couple other similar enough things that we could stick it on the show just for content purposes, and because people who like dragons probably also like griffins or also like really unique aliens, and so I feel like that kind of just counts. It's close enough, I guess the big idea is just not human point of views anymore. Just because they're more fun and they're more interesting if they're vastly different from what you already deal with every day in your life, right? At least to me, that's my opinion on it. I'll go into some examples of these books later. We also prefer that they were not villains, but that's not a requirement. The main problem with them being villains, like the arch nemesis, the named villain, the big bad with the evil plot to take over the world, is most stories are told from the point of view of the hero character, and so in that case, the dragon would not have a very prominent role. We want them to be important to the storyline, the world, or the lore of the world, which I guess is the same thing. And if they are cast as kind of like a one-off villain, they're not going to be very important. They're kind of going to kind of be throwaway. Uh, just like we also don't want them to be unintelligent beasts, just nameless enemies for the protagonist to fight against, which is a big problem with like most D&D settings. Again, at least from my experience, there's a whole lot of D&D books out there. I stay away from Forgotten Realms, for example, but who knows, maybe one of the Dritz books is actually him working with a dragon, and so it's a really decent book in that sense. I know there's a lot of World of Warcraft ones. Maybe some of them have good dragons, particularly the Red Dragonflight, since I know they worked with the humans during the Cataclysm arc, I think. I don't know. I didn't play World of Warcraft. I know a little bit about the Dragonflights just through osmosis and through Hearthstone, the card game, but not a lot. Point being is, we don't want them to just be blank faces, just tools, just animals thrown in there. We want them to be important to the story, the world, the lore, or whatever. Uh, we also want them to have a decent amount of screen time, which could be just dialogue in a book or screen time on a movie, or heck, even being the playable character in a game, or at least like a companion or similar, just because it kind of feeds back into the disappointed behind Hobbit, possibly, or Wheel of Time, if it turns out to be as bad as I fear it is, and so on. We're trying to help people find media they want to consume where they're not going to feel like they wasted more than half of the adventure just getting to the part they wanted to get to. While it's not really a big investment lost for something like an hour and a half long movie, that is a concession I'm giving to the other two. We'll have an easy episode every now and then where it's just a movie or a small set of movies. It's mostly going to be for the things like books where it's going to cost you, I don't know, upwards of $20 depending on the book, and several hours to even a couple days or weeks depending on how fast you read, and it may not be what you're looking for either. So we were going to take the dive for you, figure out how good some of this stuff is, or just recommend stuff to you that may be difficult to find in the first place. Just like I said, not a lot of online resources listing these things off. As far as movies being easy enough episodes, that's also why I decided to, or I thought and pitched the idea that we should do all the Dragon Hearts as one. I'm aware we did the Wish Dragon as a solo episode, even though that's just a single movie, just a single hour and a half worth of content to dig into. But to be honest with you guys, I felt like we kind of got off topic in that a couple times, and maybe it was fun to listen to just an hour long podcast episode of people talking about a movie. If you enjoyed that more than the Dragonheart episode, then let me know, and we can, I guess, tackle it again with each movie being its own episode. I just felt like, again, I'm comparing it to books because that's what's important to me, and I'm going to have to learn to be a little more lenient on that front. But comparing it to books, a single book would be between 8 to 15 hours, depending on its length and your reading speed, of content, right? Compared to a single movie, which is an hour and a half, I just felt like it wouldn't be very easy to have full and engaging episodes on single films. Diletan wants to do an episode on Reign of Fire, an old, either late 90s or early 2000s movie. That's a terrible movie by all standards, right? It's a terrible story. It's just, you watch it because it's bad and because it's fun, and it's kind of just an eye candy film. That actually has just dragons who are just nameless, mindless enemies for the protagonist to fight, But he wants to do an episode on that so that he can just completely bash it, completely tear it a new one. And while I think that's a great idea, I don't see how we can do a full an hour and 15 minutes worth of content on that. So I pitched the idea of we do an episode where we do like 3 or 4 bad dragon movies all in one. That just to help explain my mindset of I don't think solo movies are enough content. So I wanted to do the Dragonheart as a chunk so we could just tackle each movie together and try and tackle the world as a whole. We Whether or not you think we should do it as solo episodes, we will do another Dragonheart episode eventually because there are a few things that I noticed while editing that we didn't get into that I wanted to. A couple that I didn't even notice until like hearing it myself in the episode. Um, for example, when we were trying to pronounce Drago's real name, and I put the clip of him saying it in there. The beginning of the clip starts with him saying, "Where I'm from, they call me," or something similar, and it didn't even click in my head until I was editing it. That that implies that he came from somewhere, right? Yeah, he came in a meteor, but like, where'd the meteor come from? He says it's from the constellation. Does that mean there's a planet up in that constellation? Is it actually another just plane of existence that's kind of just visually represented as the constellation? And if he's being called something there, that means, is it like a place you can walk around and interact with people and do things? Or is it a collective consciousness, and in that sense, because he has his name, that people refer to him still, a collective consciousness where everyone is separate? I mean, maybe there's some information out there in the screenplay, or there's another book or something that I would need to track down to get these answers. Maybe we're all just going to be brainstorming and just thinking about what ifs, because like, if it's a collective consciousness where everyone has their own name and personality, do they only get one shot at life, or is there going to be like some sort of pseudo reincarnation because, oh, Draco, you did great, you came back to heaven because you redeemed yourself, that's awesome. Everybody up here has had a chance at life now, so we're going to start on second passes, and we decided you can go first. And so maybe Dragonheart Book 8, Draco's back, and that's their like in-world reasoning for it. But yeah, stuff like that. Stuff that I didn't notice, stuff that I feel like we didn't get to, mostly because we don't do a script. I feel like it is a much more natural show if we kind of just talk about things as they come up. And so without a script, some things do get missed and left behind. We're going to have to get better at coming together a couple of days prior and making at least like a bullet point list in the order that we think it's best to talk about them so we don't miss anything. Like I said, just more growing pains for the show, more things that we're learning. But yeah, there's a small group on Reddit who have found our show and talk about it, and I'm very grateful to you guys. I love you. You make me excited to do this. The positive feedback is great. You also have talked about and suggested things that I've not heard of, and so thank you for that. And I know some of you were surprised by the idea of doing Dragonheart as one episode because you felt that that really used up all the dragon movier choices. Okay. You felt like that really used up all the dragon movie choices. And sure, I guess that's kind of true. Like I said, most other dragon films I feel are the mindless enemy type. And so that sucks, right? For that reason, it might be better to go over Dragonheart again. Maybe there's a movie that you know of that I don't that you could suggest to me. I'm really open to taking suggestions, especially on the non-book stuff. Like I said, the books are my forte, and so I have quite a long to-do list on them, and it's going to take a while to get through. Which is another challenge we're going to have to tackle here pretty soon. We're kind of in the middle of tackling it a little bit with Age of Fire. So with our semi-weekly upload schedule, it's going to take, I feel like it's going to take a long time to get through some of this stuff. Age of Fire being 6 books, Rings of Fire being, I think, 17 if you can include all the side arcs, Temeraire being 9, and so on. Doing one book every 2 weeks is going to take a long time with that. Perhaps that's good. It's probably good to think 5, 10 years in the future we'll still be doing this, and so we'll need enough content to keep going. Uh, and yeah, that's valid. That's a good idea. But that just really, I guess, bothers me in a way that it means it's going to be like 6 years before we get to some of the important stuff that some of you might be looking forward to. So suggestions on the order in which to do them would be welcome. Um, as well as suggestions on how to just tackle these large projects. We could always just do the first book of Temware to introduce the world and let you explore the rest of the series on your own if you want. That's certainly an option. Something like Wings of Fire, I feel like the books are short and simple enough that we could probably do an episode per arc. That's 5 books for one episode, though. That could, again, be disappointing like the Dragonheart episode was. I don't know. I would love to hear what you guys think about it. But just, it's a lot of stuff to get through, which is a little daunting this early on. And I'm just wondering if I need to be more patient and understand that we'll get to it eventually, or if we should do a quick and dirty pass. One episode for the first half of Wings of Fire, one episode for the first 4 books of Temeraire, and so on, and then later on, once we've kind of tackled all the main bases, go back and do them one at a time. The problem with that is, like I said, Dilettant and Bantam don't read as fervently as I do, and that would be really draining for them. So another option is we would do the first book of Temeraire, the first book of Age of Fire, the first book of Wings of Fire, just to introduce the world. And then once we've introduced all the worlds we care about, come back and start doing the further books in the series is. My concern with that is using Temeraire as an example. Actually, no, let's use Age of Fire as an example, because that's the series we're doing right now, and we're already planning on doing the first 3 books. And let me explain why. I'll try to avoid spoilers and be as generic as possible, but here's a very minor warning in case I let something slip through. Book 1 introduces the world. It introduces you to dragons in general, and mostly their biology and their life cycle, because you see the world through a dragon's point of view for the entire thing, and this is your first time doing so. All 6 books are dragon point of views, but this being the first one, it focuses a lot on the dragon life cycle. What it means to be hatched, to grow up in the cave with your parents, and then to be out in the world while you wait for your wings to come in, and then territory, and mating, and all that. There are a couple of small issues along the way that he has to deal with just for the sake of telling a good story and having drama and opposition and all that. But that's what the first book kind of focuses on. The second book deals a lot more with dragon-human relations, just how with dragons interact with people on a much more, I guess, personal level. While the main character of the first book does interact with people while he's out and about, it's all in passing. He doesn't really stick with one for that long. In the second book, the character sticks with certain people for quite a long time and actually forms attachments. And then book 3, which is my favorite and I feel is the most important to this topic, deals with dragon society. There's actually dragons working with other dragons now. And you kind of see how that works, the challenges that come with that, their unique rules and their just, without spoiling it, yeah, just society in general. Rulership, military, whatever, right? And so, for the sake of introducing more readers to the world, and to just discuss the world with old fans that I hope are tuning in as well, I feel like book 3 is very important, and so doing just the first book and then leaving it at that to go on to the next series definitely loses something by not talking about the third book, and I'm really looking forward to that book. But I digress. We still reach the problem of these larger series going to take up a long time to get through, and I just don't know the best way to tackle that, and so hearing your opinions on it would mean a lot to me. I don't have the email or the Twitter for you to get in contact with me. That's something that Bantam is in charge of. I'm in charge of editing. He's in charge of the social media. Uh, so, end of the last episode or end of the next episode, you can just get it there. I'm sorry for not being very prepared for this. All right, so I got the contact info from Bantam, and our email is wodpodcast@gmail.com. That's WODPODcastmail@gmail.com. Uh, since we're talking about suggestions, I think I'm finished ranting about the show, how it started, and how we plan on having it work, and the challenges therein. Uh, as far as how we do the show, like I said in the beginning, there's this weird on and off role playing where the three of us kind of talk as if we were dragons, two dragons and one half breed. I thought that just was a little bit of fun we could have, a little bit of an interesting dynamic. It's on and off because it's kind of hard to, I guess, bring it up without being, I worry, a little overly cringy with it. Uh, but I'm just wondering what you guys think about it. Like, does it get in the way? Do you think it's enjoyable? Should we lean into it more? Should we try and do voices or have modulators to like lower our pitch and add a slight reverb effect? It could be distracting. It could completely destroy the audio quality, but it's something we could experiment with once if you think it'd be a good idea. We could come up with weird little pet names to call the listeners. It could be something as cringy as Snack, because you guys are supposed to be humans listening to these dragons talk. It makes sense that some of them would call you that. It could be something as tame as just travelers or scholars. Like, welcome, little scholars. Let us tell you about dragon lore. Today I will tell you about this old world I visited on my travels. A world called Tamriel, or whatever, right? Could be stuff like that. Could be fun. Might be slightly embarrassing for us, but that's why it's gonna just take some getting used to. But I wouldn't want to annoy you guys if you thought it got in the way, so let me know what you think about that. Also, if you have any suggestions for the show layout, the first half of the show is usually spoiler-free review, and the second half is spoiler-filled discussion. I have already noticed from people talking about it that they enjoy that. Some people have actually stopped listening to the episode at the halfway point and gone to partake of the media that we were discussing and then come back. So I feel like that's a good thing. That's a big win for the show and for me and for coming up with that. I'm really happy to see that that kind of format is actually being put to good use. But as far as getting suggestions, maybe you guys really want to hear about. Maybe you really loved my tangent on episode 4, where I ranted about shapeshifting. Perhaps you'd like us to open the show with like a 5-minute rant or a discussion about some dragon-related topic, like we're going to talk about hordes for 5 minutes before we get into today's book, or we're going to talk about magic for 10 minutes before getting into today's movie, or whatever. Uh, if you have any suggestions at all to help us make this show better, please let us know. We'll be willing to experiment and try a couple things while we're still figuring this out. But yeah. Oh, I feel like I'm talking in circles, but it's what a problem with no script. Let me know what you think about that. Do you enjoy the natural flow of conversation? Or do you feel like we talk in circles and you'd rather we have a script? That would add up to the production time, but again, just let me know what you think. Thank you for listening to me just rant about the show for a bit. To make it worth your while, I'm going to give you a couple of books as suggestions, stuff that I've really enjoyed, stuff that I've read, stuff that I'm excited about talking about on the show, but I understand it's going to be a long time before we get to most of it, and there's a good chance we don't anyway. It may not fully fill the criteria. It may not interest the other two enough. It might end up being saved for another time when I have to do a solo episode again because of life getting in the way of the other two. But yeah, here have some novels that I think you all should read. I think you'll enjoy them. I will try not to spend too long on each one, just to keep this from going too long. And I will avoid all spoilers for this part. So one of the first books I read that involved dragons when I was young, like sixth grade, I think is when I started, was the Dragonlance books. That's what I started. That was my first foray into epic fantasy. Before that, I read Animorphs, which I thought was really good, but I tried getting back into that just for nostalgia, and it's pretty difficult. It's very obvious it was written for a younger audience, and with like 50 plus books in the series, a lot of it feels very samey now. But whatever. Dragonlance, I started with. I know to an outsider looking at Dragonlance may seem daunting, and it actually kind of is. I don't think I could go back and reread the series at all. But I started with I think it's called the Chronicles, which was Dragons of Autumn Twilight, Dragons of Winter Night, and Dragons of Spring Dawn. I actually skipped Autumn Twilight on accident because I got it from the school library, and they had Winter Night, and I judged the book by its cover completely, and so that's what I started with. And I just kept going on from there. I don't think I've ever actually gone back and read Autumn Twilight. Uh, but dragons, they don't play that big of a role. There are a couple of named characters in there, but it's a pretty decent book set, and it is still the my favorite D&D campaign setting when not running homebrew. Uh, and I'm waiting for Wizards to release another campaign setting for 5th edition for it. So that's where I started. And like I said, not very many dragons, but there are a couple side stories that involve dragons. There are several anthologies which focus completely on dragons. And the downside to anthologies being they're very short stories, but they all would deal with dragons. Uh, like dragons, the title stuff like Dragons of War, Dragons of Time, that kind of stuff. There's also a set of 2 books that I absolutely adore from the Dragonlance series called the mini series is called King's Regiment, but it's the Doom Brigade, and I can't remember the second one, but the first one's called Doom Brigade, and so you can start with that. They are anthroized bipedal dragons called Draconians, which to me, good enough, right? But yeah, I love those characters, and I wish we got more with them. But I think the world advanced to the point where they're no longer the individuals are no longer there, like next generation kind of deal. But I'd love to see more with their species, with their race, with their people. There's also the Night of Blood trilogy, which is Minotaurs, which is also pretty good. Other than that, another good series I love, and this isn't dragons, and this is why I want to include just other monstrous protagonists in the podcast, is the Mage Wars trilogy from Mercedes Lackey and Larry Dixon. It's the books The Black Griffin, The White Griffin, and The Silver Griffin. The point of view is kind of a 50-50 split between a human and a griffin, uh, but the characters are wonderfully done. The griffin's point of view actually feels different enough from the humans, and it's one of my favorite trilogies. Uh, it might be a bit of nostalgia attached to it because this was another high school read, but I love it. Wings of Fire is a decent series, but it's also very popular. I mean, it's getting a Netflix show. It's gotta be popular to get a Netflix show, right? My personal opinion, the first 2 arcs are amazing. The third starts going downhill a bit. We'll see where Tui takes the series. But yeah, Wings of Fire by Tui T. Sutherland. It is written for children. It is found in the kids section of Barnes and Noble. I feel like there's some content in there that's not really suitable for kids, but I guess it's considered okay because it's dragons, not humans. Stuff like disembowelment and pulling teeth out and ripping out throats. I guess it's fine because it's not humans, but whatever. I only ever read the first 2 books of Eragon, The Inheritance Cycle. Did not really enjoy it, but it's a Dragon Rider story. I don't remember if you get the dragon's point of view or if Saphira is just there on the side, but she's at least an intelligent dragon that can talk, I think. I'm going to reread it for the show. We'll do it eventually, but it's a pretty late eventually. Uh, Age of Fire is coming up, so that's kind of obvious. But EE Knight also started a new series called The Novice Dragoneer. Or the series is the Dragoneer Academy, I think. The first book is The Novice Dragoneer. We'll get to that eventually, but it's pretty down low on the priority list, mostly because it's still being written. But there's that. I've heard good things about it. Call Me Dragon is a book that I enjoyed surprisingly. It's written by Mark Secchia, and his first series I read, he's got like several series, right? And I think most of them take place in the same world. But the first one I read was the Dragon Friend series. I think it's Dragon Friend. The first book is Dragon Friend, then it's like Dragon Love, then Dragon Soul, then Dragon something. Um, I enjoyed the first part of that series. I did not like the second part of that series. Like, if you were to divide it into halves, the first half is good, the second half is not. At least my opinion. I'll get into why when that eventually comes up on the show, but just keep that in mind if you decide to dive into it. You don't ever get a dragon point of view, but he is there for a good chunk of it. 30% of the first book takes a while for him to get introduced, but then he's there for more than half of the second, and then for most of the rest of the books. I just didn't like the subject matter mostly, but like I said, I'll get into that in some future date. Send an email to the show if you want to know now, and I'll respond to you in private, so I don't ruin it for everybody else. But yeah, so I already had low hopes for Mark Secchia, but then his new series that he just started writing, the first book being Call Me Dragon. I don't know what the second book is called, but it just came out recently. Uh, Surprisingly good. My hopes are still pretty low because, like I said, Dragon Friend started out really great, so we'll see what happens with this. But hey, fingers crossed, right? Dragon Hack is a lit RPG novel, which, if you don't know what that means, I believe the genre is identified by a world that uses RPG mechanics as part of its physics, I guess. Like, it could be because they're playing in a VR game, or it could be because it's like an isekai, and a lot of isekai animes lately have, you have stats and you level up and you get classes and all that. So books that deal with that kind of stuff, whether a world or a game, are called lit RPGs. Maybe it's for literal RPG. I don't know what it's short for. But it's a lit RPG where the player, when he plays the game, has a dragon character, and so while it is quote a dragon point of view for most of it, it's still like a human mind and a dragon body, so close enough. Um, there is a little bit of dragon point of view in there sprinkled throughout, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I won't go into detail on which dragon this is, because I feel like that's spoilery. But yeah, most of it is going to be human point of view, dragon body, but there's a little bit of dragon point of view sprinkled in as well. The Earth Dragons, spelled ERTH. The Earth Dragons is a series I've only read the first book on. It is also written for kids, just like Wings of Fire, but it's a bit more obvious. It's a bit more, I guess, dumbed down. It's also a bit more cliche, but the world building and the dragon lore I got from the first book was great. It actually has me interested to read the rest of it, but just being a kid's book is a little bit lower on my priority list. Jane Austen's Dragons is a series that I just recently started. I just barely today finished the first book, and I love it. It's another Victorian English setting, just like a Tooth and Claw. So maybe some of you won't like it, just like Bantam didn't. It also deals with a lot of society, I guess you could say, just like Tooth and Claw did. It is actually pegged, I don't know, it is actually described as a Pride and Prejudice variant, which I've never read Pride and Prejudice, so I don't know how similar it is to the real story, but maybe you have, and maybe that's something that you hated or something that you loved, but It's basically that with dragons, I guess. The dragons are basically wild animals because they still live out in the forest and whatever when they don't live with humans, but they are intelligent in that they can talk to certain people at least. Um, and there's a very the species vary greatly. Each one has its quirks, and so far it's pretty good. Uh, but again, being a book that similar to one that Bantam hated, it's probably not going to make it onto the show for a while at least. I've never read Dragon Riders of Pern, but that is on the list of stuff to do eventually on the show. And therein lies another problem of the series being like 20 books long. So maybe we'll just find like the best one or two. I don't know what we can do with that. Burn by Patrick Ness uh, is a single book. I think it's the start of a series, but I don't know for sure. But I enjoyed it. It's set on Earth. The dragons are sentient, sapient, I don't remember which is which. They talk, they have their own culture, but this book is a human point of view with the dragon as like a sidekick. He's there for most of the book, and you do get a bit of dragon lore from him. So we'll see where the series goes, but it was a book that I enjoyed. Vankir the Dragon is another lit RPG. It is a complete satire. It is written to be funny. It's not spastic. It like makes sense. It has a storyline and it follows it, but it is definitely full of comic relief, and I can't remember what the term is. It's full of real life references, real life pop culture references. Like there's a lot of World of Warcraft references. There's a Power Rangers reference. It's full of that kind of stuff. Whatever the term for that is. Uh, but you get a 50-50 split between a human and a dragon point of view, and the dragon character Vankir is just I love him. He is just the biggest lovable idiot. Tesser is a book series that I read the first two of. Uh, it's very odd. I enjoyed the world building and the history and the lore that came with it, but the ways the books are written themselves, it's the first one was maybe 30% dragon POV. The second book was a lot more, but they are shapeshifters. They are dragons who can turn into human form, and they spend most of the time in human form. So it's a little disappointing in that respect, especially since I hate shapeshifting. But I felt like the world building that I got from the first two was kind of worth it. But we'll see if I can build up the motivation to finish the series, unless it comes to the show. Uh, Low priority because of that. So have fun with that. Temeraire, I read the whole 9 book series. I loved most of it, though we got into the problem towards the end where it felt very samey, like he was just doing the same problems, I guess. Added in editing, the author is a woman, Naomi. Forgive me for using the wrong pronoun, but it's she. So his writing style, he definitely jumped from problem to problem. He would skip over any time the the world was being nice to the characters. So there would be times where they would be like on a boat for a couple weeks, and you're there with them on the boat because the boat trip is fraught with danger and drama and peril and all that. And then there'll be other times where they're on a boat trip for like 3 months, and it's just snap of the fingers, done, next scene, because it was such an easy voyage. And so because of that, it just feels like he goes from problem to problem to problem to problem, and these characters just never catch a break, and it got really frustrating for me after a while. But the dragons in it are intelligent. I think the word is sapient. Not civilized though. They can talk, and they are very prominent throughout the series, and the book does revolve around them. So there are a lot of dragons in the book. This is a good example of a book that did not have a lot of information on the lists and all that I was looking at. Uh, it was like when I would find lists talking about dragon books, it was on there, but it didn't explain itself very well, and so I hadn't read it for a long time because just hearing it was a Napoleon era book set in an alternate history version of Earth was not enough to build up my interest. So, point of the show, I take the dive for you. I eventually will talk about it, and then you can make the informed decision if you want to deal with it yourself or not. I enjoyed it. I do recommend it, even if it got a little, I guess, grindy towards the end. Okay, I think as far as I can remember, at least, that those are all the dragon books that I have read so far. There are several that are on my to be read list, but I can't really give any insights into them right now. So yeah, hopefully that's enough to kind of make up for this really odd episode. I do thank you for joining me. I hope it wasn't too big of a disappointment. We will be returning in 2 weeks with our intended plan of doing the first book of Age of Fire. We will have Dilettante with us, which will definitely add to the experience. I didn't want to do this episode without him, mostly because it was a trilogy and it felt weird to have him skip book 1 and then join us for book 2 and book 3. So yeah, again, thank you for joining. I hope you stick around. I hope you tell your friends. And hopefully I can make this show, this podcast, the best it can possibly be for you. All right. Goodbye, little snacks. Ha 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 ha. Oh, terrible.